introduction. Just a few keywords about myself. Now, I started Mommy Shots back in 2014, where I focused only on baby, family, and maternity portraits. The rest is the fact that over the years, what I've grown to learn is understanding children in a very deep manner. Now, of course, all of you as moms and dads over here, by the way, I'm so glad to see so many dads who've logged in as well to learn at the session. But being experts with your own kids, there's obviously a really tight relationship you form. But from a third person's perspective, when I walk into someone's home or meet a family outdoors for a shoot, I only have about an hour, maybe 2 hours to get to know these kids really well and have them trust me and befriend me in a very little amount of time. So my tips and tricks are really about, a sort of a growth hack. How do I actually get to have these kids become really friendly with me in that little small given amount of time? All right. So moving on to...
Amrita, ma'am?
Yes?
Can you be a bit more audible? The volume is very low.
All right. Is this better?
Yes, better.
Okay. All right. So moving forward, this entire session is going to take about, say, 40 minutes at most. So it's going to be me droning on and on. So I hope you don't zone out. But more importantly, if there's any part of this session that appeals to you or you feel like, oh, hey, that's something I've learned today, I'd love for you to share this on any of your social media platforms. Do tag Mommy Shots by Amrita, tag Ladies Circle. I would personally love to come over and have a conversation with you, and also keep an eye out to see what your smartphone photographs grow to be like after the session. So let's get started here. So to start with, right, I have a very simple approach to photography. I basically use an iPhone 11, which is the Pro Max version. And I don't typically like to attach a lot of things to my smartphone, which is, having these little moment lenses which you can attach to the back, or any other accessories, which sort of manipulate my photographs or help get me better pictures. I'm very happy with what the iPhone 11 Pro Max can do. It's got 3 lenses at the back, but I think the fact of the matter is, whatever suits you and whatever your cup of tea is what really matters here. So you do you in that sense. Now, with photography itself, I think it's 2 simple tips to be real about when we talk about smartphone photography and improving your skills therein, right? No one's going to become an overnight pro after this workshop. So what can really help you become a pro is 2 things. One is consistency, which means picking up your phone and taking pictures at every given point in time, every single day. Give me 1 second. I'd like to just keep just so I can see everyone's faces out here. Hold on. Yes. So yes, coming back to my point, consistency, that is shooting every single day, picking up your phone and taking pictures of your kids in all kinds of given scenarios, early morning, late night, with a lot of light, with little light, in different locations, at the park, at in their bedroom before you tuck them into bed, or when they're dressed up to going to school. Wherever you get an opportunity, take pictures, because every time you take a picture, it teaches you something new. It tells you what exactly you've gone right with and what you've gone wrong with, so you can start to understand these facts and make your pictures better the second time you do it. Second thing is presence of mind. While we all may have opportunity to take pictures at a given point in time, what's important is that you find a frame, you focus on the frame, you're ready to take a picture, but it's also important to recollect everything you possibly read about smartphone photography, all the little tips and tricks you've learned here, recollecting them, keeping that presence of mind, and making sure you make small adjustments. So for example, I'm taking a picture and I see my kid playing with a certain a toy, and a certain, having maybe a tea party with her teddy bear. Now, if I know that if I move 2 steps left, I'll get a much better picture where I can see my child's face in a better way. Having that presence of mind to take those 2 steps to the left to get a better frame is part of your process of growth to increasing your skill with smartphone photography. All right, moving on. Now, I think it's really important, and this is something I want to be real with in the very beginning, is we can't expect to buy a Maruti 800 car and then expect to drive it like a Ferrari, right? Because your Maruti 800 engine only can push so much. You can't really expect it to outperform itself. So when you think about smartphone photography, while smartphone cameras out there are taking all the possible initiatives to make their cameras better every year, it's not the equivalent of a DSLR camera because the sensor in your smartphone is so tiny and it can only capture so much detail, which is, by the way, extremely good today. What they said, this is a very interesting statistic I read, is that what they're saying is that in this year, 2020, 1.3 trillion photographs are going to be taken, and 85% of those photographs are going to be on your smartphone. Now, camera companies out there or smartphone companies out there have understood the value of camera as an add-on in their phones and are trying to improve it to every possible level with every version they release. So I want you to know what your strengths are in your phone and use it to those strengths rather than seeing its weaknesses and saying, oh, my camera's not good enough and I can't do what she does because she has a better phone. If you have good light and if you have good intent to take a picture, it can be done. So that's something I wanted to highlight to start with. So here's a picture that I've taken on my phone on the left of a little dry rosebud shot in bokeh mode or portrait mode. And here's a realistic picture I've taken on the right of a child in my studio. And you can see the entire picture is not in focus. She moved in the process while I was taking my picture and she's blurred and out of focus. And this, I'm sure every mom has one picture like this of their kids on their phone, right? I have a quick question. Is anyone else seeing the scribbles on my screen? A green and a yellow scribble, like a child playing with doodling on screen?
Yes, yeah, we can see the scribbles.
Yeah,
Okay,
I request none of you all to annotate on the screen, please.
Thank you so much, because that is actually throwing me off a
Sorry,
little bit.
Amrita. Very sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. All right, going back to this. Okay, so realistically, all of us find our phones to be like our second babies, right? We take care of them, we put them in covers, we feed them electricity, which is basically feeding a baby. We protect them, we carry them with us wherever we go. But that also means our phones are in the oddest of places around us, in our bags, in our back pockets, and so on. So what happens is your phone's camera, which is basically plain glass, is going to be fogged up and greasy and is not exactly going to be clean. So the first thing you do before you take a picture is take your phone out and make sure you wipe it. Wipe it with the t-shirt you're wearing, the dupatta, whatever outfit you have got on, or any handkerchief around you, or even a tissue. Just wipe that glass and then take a picture, because this is one of the first things I noticed with so many smartphone pictures out there. And I follow a lot of my moms who worked with me, so I know what their work is like. And I see some very basic mistakes that I wanted to highlight through the presentation so we can avoid them. So just here's a quick representation of what it's like with a fogged up glass as well as a clean camera lens here. Going into focusing. Now, I think the next couple of slides really focuses on the technicality of things, and then we're going to make it a little more artsy and creative by showing you a bunch of other interesting tricks you can do with your smartphone. Now, your smartphone can actually focus by itself, but between your smartphone and you, I think humans are smarter. So I always recommend that we take care of focusing by simply tapping on the subject on your phone. So if I'm actually taking a picture, I'm making sure I tap on the face of the subject and then take a picture. What that does is my camera then understands that I am pointing it to where it should focus, and then it allows me to take a nice sharp picture. Sometimes there are bigger objects in your frame and your camera will autofocus on the bigger objects. So to avoid that, I would suggest focusing right. Now, here's an example of when you haven't really focused, but you take out your camera and you quickly take a picture of the baby lying here, versus when you tap on her face, find the focal point, and then take the picture, right? The sharpness is like a world apart. Now, showing you how I typically do this. All right, so if you can see the video of the green plants first. Now, you see there's the money plant, which is really big leaves, and then there's a small tulsi plant at the bottom right corner. So what I want is to actually focus on the tulsi plant, which are really small leaves, and my camera is refusing to focus on it because it's smaller. So what I can do as a hack here is simply place my hand under those leaves. So now my hand's the bigger part. I tap and focus on the green leaves, and before taking the picture, I slide my hand away. That's a very quick trick in terms when you're dealing with really small subjects. Now here's another one where I have the baby here in front of me and I'm tapping on her face. And if you tap and hold down, you can even lock the focus where you see the AE or AF lock mentioned on top. So when I say tap and hold, I'm basically saying you're tapping and you're holding there. Don't let your finger go till you lock the focus. Now, exposure. Here's a typical shot of a sunset, and I noticed this with so many of us when we're traveling. We want to take a beautiful picture of a sunset. I've seen sunsets like this on photographs where the sky is completely blown out and you really can't see any detail. I think the simple trick with exposure or understanding exposing correctly is if you want your image to be slightly darker, which is ideally what happens when the sun is setting, the entire place gets darker. If you want your image to appear darker, tap on the brighter part. So if you tap on the sunset here, which is the brighter part, it exposes it correctly. And if you want your picture to be brighter, you tap on the darker part, which in the second picture is the city itself or the small town itself. I'm going to show you this with an example. Now you see the blue sky and the green tree, right? Now the darker part would be the shadows in the green tree. And I'm going to simply show you what happens here. I tap on the dark part, my sky becomes bright. I tap on the bright part, which is the sky, my tree becomes dark. So you see how I'm interchanging the exposure by simply tapping on the darker or the lighter part based on what I want. Okay, now I also want to show you that it's very easy to change the exposure on your picture. The yellow box here that you see is your exposure box, and this here is the exposure slider. When you tap on a picture, the exposure box appears, the focus box appears. So let's look at the center video here. I'm going to tap on the fruit and I'm going to drag the exposure slider down to decrease the light in my picture or move it up to increase it. Now I'm going to tap on the fruit and hold down till I lock the exposure. Now wherever I move my camera, the exposure is locked to that particular lighting situation. I'm going to show you that one more time here with the baby. So here I am moving my slider down and up, showing you how I can increase or decrease light in a particular scenario, because you're not going to always have enough light in your picture. Slider really helps you expose it correctly. Going forward, let's talk about light, one of my favorite topics. Now, if you've seen yourself sort of scroll through Instagram, when we're scrolling through, there are certain pictures that catch our attention and we typically scroll back to take a look at them. Right? Now, these are images that are typically exposed really well and composed really well. Now, so we're talking about composition and light. Those two things make a big difference to your particular image. So let's look at light first. Light is the most important thing in any type of photography, as we know, because if there's literally no light, you can't see what's happening. But if there is light, it makes a big difference. But light is so important in mobile photography because it makes or breaks your image. Basically, the quality of your image depends on the quality of the light available. So here are a few quick images where light plays such an important role to create the picture to seem like what it is looking like right now. Now, there are times when we do have situations with low light. That is, it's late at night, you're in a restaurant, there's dim lighting. What typically happens is this: your kids are moving around and it's impossible to sort of freeze that action they're doing right now. And the only time I managed to get a shot of this child sitting still was either when he was staring out the window or when he was sipping his juice. Now, in low light situations, I want to be able to give you a really nice solution, but the solution is adding more light, because your phones are not capable of capturing images in extreme low light conditions unless they are stationary. If they're moving about, like this child was moving about in a tube in the metro, and I was trying to capture him in motion, it was impossible to get a frame, right? But when he sat still in low light situations, I managed to get something that's sharp. So when you have low light challenges, switch on the other lights in your house, add more light, use a ring light if you have to, so that if your kid's going to just shake their head, you're going to get something frozen as a clean, clear picture versus getting something that's so dazzled. Now, here's another important thing about light. If you look at the image on the left here, you can see that my window from the baby and the baby lying on the fur blanket, the distance is about 10 feet away. I want you to see the image that I took on the right side. You can see a lot of shadow on the baby's face, right? She was 10 feet away from the window, really far from my light source. So this is the quality of light I got. Now, moving on to a shot where I moved her right up to the window and then I took a picture. Do you see the difference in the quality of light here? it makes such a huge difference. So all I would do, and even I tell this even to my friends when they're trying to take pictures, I'm like, just go stick your heads up to the window. Stick your necks out if you have to. Just make sure there's enough light, because of course not all houses are built with large windows. Some of us have really small windows. So make sure you're as close to your window or your balcony door or your main door as possible to get natural light in. And typically you want to take these pictures in the daytime, ideally between say 9 a.m. and say 2 p.m. because after 2 p.m. light starts to dwindle down and then it's closer to sunset.
Ma'am?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you don't mind, can you just remove the scribbles? Yes, thank you.
It keeps reappearing. I'm not sure how to undo that. All right. Now, this particular shot where you see the baby beside the window and the light on the face is ideally what I did even when I traveled with a friend of mine. We sat inside a cafe. We were sitting right beside the window. It was about 10 a.m. and there was a lot of sunlight outside, but only a certain part of that light got reflected back into the cafe. And I made sure she sat there and I posed her and I took a picture. But now, this ideal lighting scenario is not necessarily what happens every single time, right? You may not necessarily want to take a picture inside. You want to take it outdoors when you're traveling and you want to capture a landscape or you want to capture, a certain beautiful looking street like this one behind my friend. So while she was walking in the sunlight, you can see clearly on her face, there are really harsh shadows on one side of her face and really harsh light on the other side. And you can see that evident shadow on the road as well. Now, the idea here was to get a picture of her walking along the streets in Copenhagen. Now, while I didn't have the ideal lighting scenario, I did take a picture. But how do I improve a picture like this? All I did was ask her to walk 4 steps forward into the shade. What she did is when she walked into the shade, there's so much sunlight that it reflected off of the buildings around me and fell back on her face. So now she's in shadow, her face is well lit or evenly lit, and I still have the pretty street in the background. So win-win here, right? So I'm showing you how to use your light smartly so that you don't always have to lose out on a good picture when you're in a great location. So if you're at the beach, make sure the light's behind the subject. If you're out of the streets, find shade, any sort of shade. Put your subjects in the shade and take a picture. Just sort of improve on the existing scenario here. So I want to show you what I do in the studio, and this is actually more from a professional standpoint that I sort of, honed and skilled over the years on getting the perfect light on a baby. So what we typically do is you all saw the baby on this beanbag and you saw a curtain beside her. So I want you to watch this video closely. This is with the curtain drawn open and there's direct light falling on the baby. Then I drew close the curtains. And you see the light is a little softer and more diffused. Now I opened it again, it's a lot harsher. Now from a layman's perspective, when the window is drawn open, that seems like more light. And when you close this or draw close this curtain, there's lesser light. While we are actually reducing the amount of light, what happens is the light is getting diffused through these sheer curtains. And I don't mean any curtain, you've got to use white sheer curtains to give this really nice soft effect. So let me break it down further. This is the picture I took when I drew open the curtains. You see a lot of light in the face, but what you also see are really harsh shadows. Now, this is a picture I took when the baby, with the baby on the bed, but the curtains drawn closed, and these are nice white sheer curtains. And this is the final result I got. Now, what I want you to focus on in these two pictures is the shadow part. You see how harsh and dark the shadows are in the first image versus the shadows in the second image. As professionals, we are seeking to get really nice soft shadows on our subjects. When we're working with moms, babies, families, soft light just spells it out better, but this is my style, my approach. You don't necessarily have to agree. If you like the image with the really harsh shadows, that works perfectly well as well, and that's the beauty of photography. There are no rules, and you can choose to bend the rules as you like, as long as it appeals to you. Now, when I edit these images, this is what the edited version looks like versus this. Again, if you compare the two, I'm not sure how many of you will agree with me when I say that the one on the right with the soft shadows is definitely a step ahead in terms of understanding how light shapes a baby or how light shapes a subject. All right, moving on. What do you do when you have harsh light situations and how do you use it? When you have really harsh light, what that helps you is that it helps you freeze action. All these birds flying out here was taken during, I think, 12 in the afternoon. And you notice very carefully, all the birds in the frame are sharp, are tack sharp, and completely frozen in action. Now, I tried taking a picture of a bird in the evening at around 6 o'clock when the sun was setting. This was shot in Jaipur. Do you notice that the bird is not really in focus? It's blurred out. That's because there wasn't enough light. In the first picture, where I have all these brownie kites, I have lots of light overhead, right, at 12 in the afternoon. The second picture shot during sunset has very little light falling through, and that wasn't enough light to freeze the action of a bird. Here's just another picture I borrowed from a friend who takes a lot of pictures of her son, and I'm a big fan of them. So I sort of borrowed them to show them over here. While the kid was sort of walking away very quickly with the bucket on his head, the only way to get the baby frozen in action was by having ample light, and you can see a lot of light in the back. This is pretty much how I use it when I'm working with children at work as well. I'm making sure when I'm getting shots of them running around, we're doing it in broad daylight. Now, moving on to my next part, which is composition. Now, composition in photography means ideally knowing where to place all your subject or certain elements in the frame to create a beautiful frame that you call a picture. Now, there are several rules of composition, but the smartphone today, they are adding more and more tools for you to improve your photography skills so that you use their camera phones more, and so you get tempted to upgrade as well. So while smartphones really equip you with a lot of tools to help improve your photography, I'm going to pick on one particular rule of composition here, which is actually the rule of thirds. So you see my frame, I have like a little hill, I have a tree in the background, I have my camel, which is the main subject. Now, if you notice, my camel, or rather the camel in the desert, is actually placed at 1/3 of the entire photograph. Let me explain this better. You have something called grid lines on your phone cameras, which are basically these vertical and horizontal lines running across your screen. Now, the rule of thirds states that if you place the subject at the intersection, this one, or this one, ideally you're playing the rule of thirds composition. All right, so here's just a perfect example to show you how I place the camel at this particular intersection into the picture, and I use the rule of thirds compositional rule in my photograph. Now, going to this a little further, I want to show you first, how do you add these grid lines on your camera? So go to your settings, scroll down, go to camera, and you will see something called grid. Turn that slider on. This is available on iOS and Android phones, rather every phone in the market. Now, you will get the grid lines, and the 4 circles you see on the grid lines are typically where you want to place your subject to be able to get the rule of thirds action. So here is again another example of me using the rule of thirds to take this picture of this dry bud I found while trekking. So I basically move my phone around to make sure that the intersection of the lines was at the flower, and then I took the picture. What these grid lines also help you with, and I'm really excited about this one, is because if you see the picture of the beach, this was in Bali, you can see my horizon line is slightly slanted down this way, which kind of looks like the earth is falling, which is really weird. For me, it's so important that the horizon line is actually straightened out, and the grid lines actually help you do that, or your composition grid lines will help you do that. So I'm going to add my grid lines and straighten out my image by simply moving the slider till the horizon line is parallel to my grid line, and then I save it. All right, so apart from just helping you compose better, the grid lines also help you straighten horizons. This is just an example of compositional rules I use in my own photography at work as well. Like you see the one on the left here, the couple, they are centered, and my composition here is completely centered. Whereas the other 2 pictures of the 2 kids, I'm using the rule of thirds. Here's a quick example again to show you with the baby I borrowed to give you examples in the smartphone workshop. So I'm centering the baby here in the entire frame, and I've taken a picture, and then I'm placing her at the intersection of 2 lines to use the rule of thirds for this. So let's see what these look like. This is my rule of thirds. Do you see all the negative space around her? And then I sort of centered her, but I did it differently. I wanted to get those chubby hands at her mouth. I wanted that to be my center of focus. I put that in the center, or rather the top fist on the center, and I filled my frame with the entire baby. So just different ways to experiment with it. Now, one of my favorites, okay, which is adding action to your photographs, because when you add action, you're actually sort of making the image a little more dynamic, and you're also trying to tell a story. So here's a photograph I've taken in Kerala. You know, great. I have 3 layers here. I have water, I have land, and I have sky. But just waiting a little while in that same spot, had a bird fly through my screen. Now this picture definitely adds more volume or depth to the image than the previous one, because having a bird fly through the frame just spells out a little, makes it a little more interesting, if you ask me. So what I'm saying is it ideally makes an image come to life. And adding a moving object such as like footprints in the sand, or maybe your kids kneading dough, or like just their little baby hands building a sandcastle, tells a better story. So here's an example of, instead of taking a picture of the dad and son sitting across the lunch table, I took a picture of him feeding his child. And I really like this because it tells so much, him feeding the baby, slurping up the noodles. It just has a stronger story to take away from that particular event. Two very quick pictures I pulled out from my own repository was just to give you an example. Now, what I originally went for was just getting this green door and the brick wall as my original picture with a name board that says La Rambla. Like, this is one of the most popular streets in Barcelona. So while I aimed for that alone, and I thought, okay, simple door, just a brick wall, a lot of texture, and the name board, it spells out a lot about the location. I was taking the picture, and while I was waiting there, from the corner of my eye, I could see a line of tourists walking by. Now, this is a major shopping street as well, and it's a huge tourist spot. So I saw these tourists walking single file into my frame, holding shopping bags. So I simply waited there, let them pass through my frame, and then I took the picture. Now that value of this image doubles, because not only am I showing what La Rambla looks like, but I'm also telling the story of how tourists shop over here, and the whole image came to life here. Again, a very quick one. Not a great picture if you ask me, it's okay, but imagine if this entire picture didn't have any humans in it. All you'll see are these textures and patterns on the buildings around and an empty crossway, right? But I love the fact that these people crossing the road are in the midst of crossing the road, where I raised my phone up and took a picture. Their expressions, what they're doing. One lady's adjusting her shawl, the other's carrying a bag, someone's sipping coffee, someone's texting. There's just so much more character that comes to life when you have something like this. So I hope you see the difference in adding action to your image here.
Ma'am,
Now,
would you be
coming to
able to slow down a little?
Absolutely. All right.
Yeah.
Adding the bokeh effect, we're now coming to the part where you can make your images a little more creative. Now, the bokeh effect is no new idea to all of you. All of you understand what bokeh is. It's basically the isolation of your subject from the background, or in layman terms, it is adding blur to your image. You notice how the flowers are in focus, the sunset and the trees and the sky, everything's blurred out in the background, right? Now, you can simply do this in two ways. You can hit the portrait button or the portrait mode on your camera phones and aim for a shot like this. Similarly with this, you can just simply hit the portrait mode, or you can use your regular mode. Go to your photo, instead of switching on the portrait mode, use your regular photo mode and just move close to a subject. You'll be able to achieve the same kind of blur. So the second picture of the baby in the bathtub, you see the blur only because there's a certain distance between the subject and the background. Now that is the most important step when you're using the regular mode and trying to achieve this blur in the background. Okay, make sure the distance between your subject and the background is huge to achieve that blur. I'm going to break that down further. I also want to tell you that your blurring of your backgrounds does not necessarily have to be in the background. You can also have blurred objects in front. And here's a beautiful example, again shot by a dear friend of mine. You see how they've laid the baby on the bed, they placed all these candies around them, and they lifted up one candy stick to make it the dress of the baby. Now, when you're actually holding a candy stick, you're holding your camera, the only way, or rather what your camera will do here is it'll start focusing on the green the green popsicle, because that is closest to the camera. The rule is whatever is closest to the camera gets focused on automatically by the camera, which is why it's important for you to tap on the subject. So while the mom held the little popsicle under the camera phone, she made sure she tapped on the baby's face and then took the picture, just so the focus stays on the baby's face and not the little popsicle stick she's holding. Fair? So you can add layers in front and make them a little more blurred out than what's in focus at the back. Now here's a quick video to show you how I've done bokeh with of this again this dried rose on my track, where you notice how I focused on that particular flower and everything else in the background has this beautiful, soft, dreamy, buttery bokeh or blur to make it simpler. And then there's this shot over here where I tapped on my coffee cup, but everything around the coffee cup is not blurred. The reason being, my coffee cup is basically kept right on top of my table. Now the distance between my subject, which is my coffee cup, and the table is about 2 inches, and that's not enough to give you a blur. Remember how I told you that you need to have a certain amount of distance between the subject and the background to achieve a blur. So here's a video just explaining that better. So I use the portrait mode, as you can see, and I've taken pictures. So I'm tapping on her fingers, I'm tapping on her eye, on her face to make sure she's sharp in focus. And you can already see like a nice blur in the background. My curtains are kind of blurred out. All right. So while I have this, I'm going to show you what the end result look like. You can see the baby is nice and sharp in focus. Whenever you want to have the subject in focus, it's always good to tap on their eye. All right. And you see why I managed to get that focus? It's because there's a certain amount of distance you need to keep between her and the background. And that distance will give you that blur or that bokeh effect that you want. Another last example here to show you why it didn't work out is because the baby is lying on a bed sheet or a quilt, and the distance between her nose and the quilt behind her is just about 2 inches again. So it's not going to give you that effect. Same as a coffee cup example. All right. Another thing that I can tell you that will help you with your pictures is to try different angles, because I think by default we're always standing this way, pointing the phone down to your kids or to your children and taking a picture, which is like the easiest thing to do. But when you experiment with different angles, you're going to surprise yourself. So I want to quickly show you a simple example here where I was taking this picture of this camel in the desert. Now, all I did while I have this picture, which is okay, all I did now was take 2 steps forward. I sat down and I pointed my phone camera straight on to the camel's face. And this is the image I got, which is a lot better than the previous one. Now, I've noticed that so many of the moms I follow and who are friends of mine, they're all taking these, point your phone down to the baby and take a picture shot. I think that's okay for a few, but it always makes it a lot better if you actually get down to the eye level of the child and then take the picture, because then you're starting to show the world from their perspective, because they're only this small. So here's just another example of how you can get experimentative when you're taking pictures of things around you. Like we were at a little flea market, and I found a space over here where I could point my phone down and take a picture, versus standing along with those people down on the ground floor and then taking a shot. So again, how I applied these simple tips to my work when I'm commissioned to work with families. I'm trying to experiment with different angles with children. So speaking of angles, here's another important tip, because this is again a recurring thing I see with everyone. You see this picture of the baby here lying on the mat, and I've literally done the exact same thing what anyone else would do. The baby's in front of me, I'm taking the phone and I'm pointing the phone down. You see, this is pointing it down, this is holding it straight. So I'm pointing it down and taking a picture of the baby on the bed. Now what happens here is you can see up her nostrils, you can see up her nose, which isn't a very flattering image as compared to this, where instead of pointing it up her nose, I'm holding the phone above the bed and taking the shot, like I have with the image on the right side. Okay, so this little small change in angle just makes a huge difference to your images, and this is one of the rules I teach all my students who are coming to learn photography for me as well, that when they're shooting newborn babies or like babies below 6 months of age, always hold the phone above and don't shoot up the nose. So here's a simple example to show you how I'm holding the phone above the baby's face make sure not to drop it. But you see how the phone is parallel to the baby's nose? And that's ideally what you're aiming to do as well in terms of angles. All right, playing and experimenting with shadows and light is one of my favorite things to do. Now, when you work with finding even light or just making maybe switching on all the lights in your house and then taking a picture of your child, that's great because you have nice even light from all directions and there's no way you made a mistake there, which is great. But when you're playing with shadows and light, it makes a whole dramatic effect to the whole image, right? Like the ones you're seeing here, where I'm finding shadows and I'm working with them. There's so much you can do here. What I feel about shadows is it becomes interesting, it becomes a little more complex, and it catches attention as well. So even light is safe, but uneven light is always adventurous and creative. Now, shadows are not really the main focus here, but the focus is really adding a little bit of, darkness and lightness to your image. And that's what you're trying to achieve here. And that's what makes it more interesting. So here's an interesting example of where I'm playing with shadows and light, where you can see that the image on the left of the dad and his son, I noticed these shadows coming through the wall because there were holes in the wall. So I made dad and his son stand there. I saw the light falling on them. I really liked what I was seeing, so I went ahead and took a picture. The image on the right is mom and her son sitting on the light, and there was great sunset light coming through the window. So dad decided to take this picture because it just brought about a nice evenness. You can see a lot of light on his collar, and you see the rim light around his hair, on his head. All of that just adds a little value to the picture versus a regular picture. So experimenting in the genre of shadows and light takes years to master, but it can be done. But it's something I want you to think about when you pick up the camera next time. Here's another one where I was on a project working with a mom and her kids, and I sat down in front of the kids and I took a picture of them on the floor, looking right into the camera. But when I saw this curtain and I saw the little sliver of light falling across them and the shadow of the curtains on them, I immediately stood up and took a top shot just to get this entire finish. And this picture had more value for the mom than the straightforward shot of the older sister kissing her younger sister. So just some thoughts I'm leaving out here. My favorite, and this is the last one before we move on to the next part. We're good on time, right? I still need another 5 to 10 minutes. Silhouettes. Images like this are beautiful to create, but all you need is a really strong backlight. Now, silhouettes are basically shooting against light, and it takes backlighting to a whole new level. The light behind has to be really strong for you to achieve this effect, and I'm going to show you how it's achieved here. Now, if our subjects here are human beings, so you want to make sure you tap on the humans because your phone is definitely going to get confused when you point it to a scenario like this. Your phone will ideally struggle to focus on the subject versus the background. So you want to guide your camera phone by tapping on the subject and then taking the picture. But there are a few steps you want to do before that. Now, here's a picture of a mom and baby. You can see the light at the back. The light at the back is not so great, but I'll still work with it. So what I did now here is I simply used the exposure slider. I tapped on the mom. I used the exposure slider and I pulled the slider down. It became dark. I pulled it down some more and then made it a black and white image. And this is the silhouette picture I achieved. So let's see how I got this. So here's mom playing with her child. So first I'm trying to focus and find a frame. Once I find my frame, I tap on the mom, I bring down the exposure slider and make it darker, and I take a picture. So I'm taking a couple of them just to make sure I get the right expression in one of them. Now, all I'm doing here is really simple. I'm going to my iPhone filters, which are at the bottom in my phone gallery. And by clicking on the filters, I'm going to go and pick a filter that looks nicest for the silhouette look. I chose a black and white one. I controlled the exposure a little bit here. I made changes all on my phone gallery. So once I've set the exposure, I'm going to crop the image because I don't need all of that information. Just the story is here between the mom and the child. And that's what I want the focus to be on. And there you go. That was pretty simple, right? Now, this marks the end of the entire presentation here, but I still have another part to go through, which is editing. I want to show you how I make very easy edits on my phone. And I'm not going too in depth because one, we don't have the time, and two, it takes a lot of time to understand what each tool in your editing app stands for. But I want to show you VS Code, which is a simple free app available with limited number of filters also available, but they're really nicely made filters by professionals in the industry. And all you have to do, okay, for a shot like this is shown here. So I open the VS Code app, I scroll down and I select the original image. I double click on the image, hit the two lines at the bottom where I get a range of filters to choose from. So I'm going to scroll through, find a filter that looks nice, and then I'm going to select it and then hit the two lines at the bottom. You get all these tools like exposure, contrast, and so on. So I increase the exposure, I hit next, and I hit save. And that's the finished image you're seeing here. Let me show you one more here. All right, so there's the original picture that I got from the parents. How I edited it, you may not necessarily have to like what I've done, but you can work around it the same way I did and find your own version that you like. So I'm on the VS Code app. I first pull up the image by importing it. Then I open the image, I hit the two lines at the bottom. I'm going to go tap on a whole bunch of filters, see which one looks nice. Sometimes you may not like the strength of the filter. So once you find a filter you like, just hold down and press and a star will pop up. You can control the strength of the filter, and I reduced the strength of the filter by about 20%. Now I'm going to go hit the two lines at the bottom and make smaller changes where I'm going to focus on sharpening the image a little bit. Then I'm going to increase the contrast just so I can make a difference between the bright parts and the dark parts. All right, but you also want to make sure that you don't make the dark parts too dark. So I will reduce the highlights and maybe increase the shadows a bit. The highlights are mainly to bring back detail in the sky. And then we're going to go forward and increase the saturation to bring out the blue sky and the green lawn a little more. After that, I'm pretty much done. I'm going to hit next and then hit save. Simple, right? So VS Code is a really simple app to use, but if you are someone who's already well versed with simpler apps and you want something a little more detailed, like if you want to make adjustments to skin and so on and so forth, there are more complex apps out there, one of them being Photoshop Express. This is one of my personal favorites and I use this a lot to edit my pictures. So PS Express is free to download and free to use. There are features that allow you to pay, that can be paid for, and you can access a lot more features as well. Now, PS Express, I pulled out a simple image, and honestly, there's nothing to fix on her face, but if I were to do something, I would simply just remove that little mark on her chin, which is a natural mark, but I'm just going to remove it just to show you how to maybe remove baby acne or any blemishes you see on your skin and you want to get rid of. So here's just an example photograph. So I'm going to open PS Express. I'll take my time and scroll down and pull out this particular image. The best way to learn these editing apps is to learn it by purpose. Like you want to remove that one particular mark. I'm going to show you what all this has. Okay, you hit basic. You'll see so many different tools like light, color, FX, details, HSL, that is the tonality of the image, adding blur after you take the picture, and so on. I'm going to hit the blemish button where it tells me how to use it, and I move the slider to increase or decrease the brush size. So I decrease the brush size to the right amount, and I simply tap on my screen on the parts that I want to have fixed. And the app does everything for you. So I'm going to reduce the brush size further and just quickly touch up the parts that I think need a little more fixing. So think heat boils, think any marks that you want to get rid of. This is the perfect tool to use. After which, I'm just going to simply hit next, and I'm going to save this image to my camera gallery. Okay, and that's the finished image. So you can see how much more detail you can get into. Now, I want to go to the last part. I'm going to take another 5 minutes over here, but this is like a real takeaway. Now, I have done the smartphone photography workshop in the past, and I've noticed how many moms have asked me for questions beyond this entire thing. So we've actually created, as a company, we've created a new program for moms. It's called 2020. It's 20 minutes every day for 20 days, where we touch different topics on photography, specifically for child photography, and we teach you all of that content. This program is being launched in September end sometime, And the details will be on my Instagram account. I think we shall leave my Instagram account details on the chat as well. But if you're looking to further your skills around smartphone photography, then that is definitely the program for you, where we break down every single tool you see on an app and explain to you why you use it and for what you use it. But I think it all boils down to one thing. Why are we taking so many pictures? Finding intent and purpose before you take a picture just makes your photograph more meaningful. Now, someone somewhere was trying to take pictures of their kids because, simple, their kids were growing up too fast. So in order to do that, they started capturing different milestones. They realized that their child is only so tiny for so long and will only do tummy time for this amount of time. So it's important to capture that phase. Then they know that the kids have just begun to walk, or they're sitting now and they don't know how to walk and they're crawling. So let's capture that as one particular phase. In my own business, I have found ways to identify milestones, and I started to actually create offerings around them. So I wanted to break them down here for you so you can see them the way I see it, and then decide how you'd like to approach your photo shoots with your children. There are 4 different categories I put down here. They can be broken down further, but I'm going to be grouping them like this for now. Your infants are typically 0 to 6 months, and this is the age they're only lying on their back, or they're, sort of flipping over onto their tummies, and they just get more expressive with age and time, and their threshold definitely increases as well. Like a 3-month-old gives me a threshold of about an hour in a photo shoot. That is, after they've woken up till the end of the shoot, I have like a good hour of energy. And if you think your kids are awake for like 2 or 3 hours at the age of 3 months, that's great. But in a photo shoot, we tire them out a lot faster with dress changes and making them laugh and making them smile. So keeping these little thresholds in mind, it helps you identify what that child is doing at that particular age and what can you do with a child in that age. So for 0 to 6 months, I'm usually playing with top-down angles where I'm making them lie in the bed, making them laugh, playing little peekaboo games, or keeping beautiful elements around them to spell out their milestone, like, drawing drawing, I don't know, the number 3 with leaves or whatever it is that you get creative with. But I'm usually doing top angles, or I'm sitting down and making them do tummy time. Sitters, on the other hand, are kids who've learned to sit independently with no back support and have learned to crawl as well. Now, sitters are generally very quick. So as a photographer or as someone who's taking the photographs, you need to be equipped to move really fast and then take pictures of them on the go. What's important here to note is when they start moving, you're going to be moving with them, which means you need to have really still hands and you should have ample light around you so that you don't miss a really nice shot of them in a good mood, crawling away in excitement. So keep that in mind. With toddlers, what's really helped me has been the fact that I have learned or have taught myself how to storytell. And as parents, I'm sure all of you are experts at storytelling. So it's about getting their attention or gripping their attention with something very interesting and then being ready to take a picture in that moment. Or what you can do is sort of lure them with something in your hand and ask them to come to you. And as they're walking towards you, you want to say something that will elicit a smile or a laughter. And with toddlers, I think another thing that really works is also, sort of teasing them a lot or tickling them, playing with them, and all of that. So use your storytelling skills or your jokes or your humor or even interesting characters that they're currently into. Like I know 2 and 3-year-olds are obsessed with Peppa Pig. So I use a lot of Peppa Pig references when I'm trying to get their attention. I've got my camera ready at all times. So the moment they give me that expression, I'm there for it. Now, children, as they get older, 3+ age group, they get a lot more camera shy. They think they're adults, and I treat them like adults. I treat them like I would speak to the mom. And I also make sure that I do understand what their interests are, what their hobbies are, and make sure I bring that all into my conversation with them while I'm clicking with them or understand their favorite games and then play those. As parents, what I normally what I tell moms to do is, kids, their age, if you tell them not to do something, they go ahead and do it. So if you don't want them to smile, just tell them not to smile, not to smile, not to smile, and finally they'll crack open a large smile. So you want to use all of these tips and tricks well planned while you've got your phone in place, while the framing is perfect. It's a lot of multitasking, but that is the reality of child photography. So I hope this helps you identify how we sort of categorize kids and then work with them in a certain approach, because every child of every age group requires a totally different approach. So do I have another 5 minutes, Chandana?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. All right. I'm going to make this really quick because I've been droning on for so long and I can't wait to hear the questions you have. But these are things that you can use in your daily plans to take photographs of your kids with your spouse and so on. So I want to talk about the beauty of unposing, which is when you ask your kids to pose, you're going to get a picture if they're obedient, yes, but it's always nicer when you unpose. First thing I have for you here is taking safe shots. While this may be really boring, I think these are a nice way to remember the stage. So this is a 6-month-old lying down on this thing. I just got her attention by saying something to crack her up, and you know what, the mom there really helped me understand what makes her laugh. And thankfully, she found my face funny. So I got a safe shot like this, and safe shots always work. Get them, keep them safe, and then experiment with other pictures you want. Simple shots like this, asking, your spouse to take a walk with your child. It could be, walking into the sunset. It could be just the two of them looking at each other while they walk towards you. Simple shots like this really go a long way. Working with negative space. I love taking shots like this. Just imagine a picture like this on a huge white wall. Okay, no matter how big or small this picture is, your eyes are going to fall straight on the expression between dad and baby or the connection they have, right? So working with negative space can be done outdoors with so much ease. Or if you have a really large house and a really nice big plain wall, make them do the exact same thing in front of that wall. I'm trying to say keep all your surroundings really clean and focus on the subject. Now, another very important one is the moment is much bigger than the perfect frame of your photograph. So for example, in this shot, you can see one baby chair or high chair in the background. You can see a lot of window light coming in. The curtain is like rolled up and kept. But I don't care. My eyes don't fall there. My eyes fall on the expression and the excitement of that little child and the mom. And this moment, just be forgiving about it and just learn to notice how the moment is really much bigger than the frame. This is a very, very simple shot, right? I think everybody plans this shot with their respective partners and try it out when their kids are young. But what if you simply had to just move behind the dad and take the exact same shot, right? So play with angles as much as possible. So once you take your safe shot, find another angle and try that one instead. You'll be surprised at the range of variety of pictures you can create yourself. This is in a pool. This was in a hotel where I decided to get into the pool and stand behind the parents because this little boy kept jumping to the water, then getting out, going back up and jumping again. So every time he did it, I jumped in, stood right behind the parents and got their perspective of their son jumping in with so much trust, right? Something again done with work where I just tried taking a top angle versus the usual ones that I usually do. Real laughter. This is something that as parents, you all have a lot of access to, right? You know exactly what makes them laugh. So plan it out, keep your phone ready, get the other partner to tickle the child or trouble the child or just sort of, play with them or say something funny. And then you be ready with your camera to just take those pictures. This is one of my favorite things I'm going to share with you, which is documenting your everyday. The reason why my company is called Mommy Shots is because it's what a mom sees on a day-to-day basis of their kids growing up, right? And this is exactly what I want to leave you with here, saying that their everyday is a beautiful way to remember their childhood. And trying to take pictures of their everyday in every year gives them a great glimpse into it, but don't forget to print those pictures. Shots like this are not something I get very easily because I'm commissioned to do it on a particular day. So we have something called a day in the life of a child, where I come in early morning before the kids wake up and I capture them throughout the day till the end of the night. Now, this has become one of the most popular services I have to date. And it just sort of documents everything in a very raw, genuine way. But as parents, you have the vision every single day to do this. Here's another very sweet one from that set. Last one, no, I think last two I have. Cuddles, kisses, and activities. If the kids are older, we always plan activities, like it could be baking, it could be painting, but just making sure the parents are involved. Either parent is involved or both parents are involved, and your sister or someone is taking that picture. Or just get all the kids to sit there, get everyone to tickle that one child, and everyone's attention is on that one child, and they go for it. So just find ways to make it really interesting for children as well, and you're sure to have them give you the best smiles ever. Lastly, each parent with a child, I've noticed how a majority in my smartphone photography classes are women, whereas the photography industry in general is male dominated. So, I'm always baffled by why only women show up or the moms show up. Where are the dads? So I keep telling moms and dads, take turns and take pictures, because having just the dad and child all the time is not fun. Moms should be in pictures as well. So find a way to force your husbands to take those pictures for you. Because when you're 30 years, or when I get older, or when you get older, the pictures we really treasure right now are the ones with our parents in it, not our silly solo photographs in multiple costumes, right? So make sure you get this done. Last one is those really funny, cute expressions. No matter who's making those silly expressions, make sure you try and capture those. Now, this one's for anyone who has a sense of humor, because the parents were okay with it. But funnies, capturing funnies like this can go a long way someday. This girl's gonna really laugh it off at some point. And don't worry, she was perfectly fine. She got up in a second and ran like nothing ever happened. And that brings me to my last one, which is no matter what, whatever pictures you may capture, just remember it's really about the memory behind the picture, and it's not really about getting the perfect photograph for your child. At the end of the day, your child's going to really enjoy these moments 30 to 40 years from now, and that's what you've got to keep in your mind while creating those memories. So this is me saying thank you. I'm accessible on all of these platforms. You can always reach out to me should you have any other questions. And thank you, Chandana. Thank you, Sapna, for having me here. If there are any questions now, I'd love to take them.
Thank you, Amrita. That was amazing. I just loved all the tips that you gave us. Now we have our participants eagerly waiting with their questions. So I request Sir Chandana to kindly initiate the question and answer section. Over to you, Chandana.
Thank you, Sapna. Right in the beginning of the session, we had, towards the middle of the session, we had Pragi who wanted to ask a question. Pragi?
Hi, Amrita. Hi.
Hi, Pragi.
Hi. So I've been following your page for quite a while now. And when you had the focus point of it, where you can blur out pictures, you had a picture of a coffee cup. So in that picture, there were almost 6 different kinds of browns. Does color play a role when you're trying to blur something?
Color does not play a role when you're trying to blur something, but my coffee cup slide, I'm just going to pull that up here.
Yeah.
In this picture, there are
this one.
multiple shades of the brown.
Correct.
Around the coffee cup as well, right? You're saying?
Yeah. Yes.
So
yes.
that does not play a role. In fact, the idea of showing this picture was to show you that there is no blur that exists here in this image, because the coffee cup is really close to the table, right? So there has to be a certain amount of distance for the blur to even appear. So to answer your question, no, the colors don't play a role when you're blurring.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
No problem.
Can we have Varsha Parekh? Varsha, would you like to ask Amrita your question? One sec. Yes, Varsha? Okay, Varsha's question was, please give tips on how to get into child photography professionally. Where to start?
Okay, then Varsha, I think you're talking to the right person for this, because all of the lockdown, all I did was really just create a platform for photographers or aspiring photographers who want to get into child photography as a genre. So Diksha can share our entire platform with you. It's called Learn, and we've got over 20 resources we've created over the last 6 months in the pandemic to sort of help other people who want to get into this profession. But I think keeping my platform aside, what I would tell you, Varsha, is the best way to get into it is only practice. I've done 1,400 shoots so far, and that's really what's brought me here. That I'm not saying do 1,000 shoots. I'm saying make sure that you learn from every session you practice in, and then refine your work with every single chance you get. I hope that helps you, Varsha.
I would also like to inform Varsha that we also have our level up workshop that's we are starting our batch 5. So I've also posted the link there. So you can also take a look at that.
Yes. Can I take a question I see on the chat room, Chandana? Is that okay? There's one from Amla. And I think somebody else asked the same question. How do you take a shot of a moving child? I'm going to jump to that question because it's a good one. I think whenever we're talking about capturing our kids in motion, what I tell moms are go outdoors as much as possible to get that shot. Go to your terrace, go to the street you're living in, go to a garden, anywhere outdoors, and then try taking shots like that, because trying to achieve shots at home, unless you have ample light, it's really challenging. So anything to do with action, try to take it outdoors where there's ample amount of light. I'm ready for the next one. There is.
There's
I'm not able to hear anyone.
okay. So we have a question.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question from Megha. She's have asked if we can use portrait mode for multiple kids or multiple people.
Hi, Mika. You can't use portrait mode on multiple people because someone will be blurred out unless all of them are on the same line. So for example, if this coffee cup is another person, they have to be on the same plane as me for them to be in focus. If they're even slightly behind or slightly in front, they'll be in focus, I'll be blurred out. So this is something called planes, P-L-A-N-E-S. Your subjects have to be on the same plane for them all to be in focus in the portrait mode. If they're slightly behind on a different plane or ahead on a different plane, they're going to be, one of us is going to be out of focus based on who you focus on. I hope that helps you.
We also have another question. Someone who asked, what do you mean by add action? They wanted to clarify that line.
All right. Okay. So Shivantika, thanks for that question. Adding action is basically, let me give you an example. So I'm your child and I'm sitting here in front and I'm sitting at my table eating a meal. It could be a bunch of fruits or something, right? So me holding my plate of fruits and looking at your camera and smiling is great. You know, it's a nice portrait shot. It tells you a story of that I'm about to eat my meal versus me poking my fork in, opening my mouth wide and going, like I'm waiting to eat it. That is adding action. The action is lifting the fork into my mouth because I love that fruit and I have an expression of excitement around that. And that action is what you're capturing. So that's what I mean by adding action versus just her sitting here and looking at the camera and smiling. Hope that helps you.
Amu, there's another question from Indra. She wants to know suggestions on correct lens for the correct moment.
Okay, so I typically would say you can shoot everything in your regular photo mode. You only want to use portrait when you have a subject sitting still, because our portrait lenses on our phones are a little slow. They don't work as fast as we need them to. So you want to actually use the portrait mode when someone is staying still for a few seconds, because whenever you take a portrait mode shot, as you can see in this one second, I'm just going to go back to my slide. This little video here, just notice how slow it is to take a portrait picture. You see my shutter on the center going round and round. It takes that much time to process a photograph shot in portrait mode. So try and shoot in regular mode as much as possible. So there is no, our phones are about, our regular phone lenses are about 28 mm, which is really wide. So you want to be able to master how to use that versus switching between portrait and this thing and trying to capture a picture. Focus on learning each lens really well before you switch, is what I would tell you.
Thank you, Amu. There's a question from Vishwajit Pai who says, what's your take on the use of Pro mode in smartphones?
My take on the Pro mode in smartphones. I think the moment you get really comfortable with your smartphone camera is when you want to upgrade to the Pro mode. So in fact, I use an app called X Pro Camera, which allows me to shoot a frame in RAW mode, which is the highest possible resolution, as well as a very heavy file that allows me to edit it to a whole new extent. Now the X Pro Camera app is something I'm comfortable with because I also have experience shooting with my smartphone on a regular basis and my DSLR. So switching to Pro in the beginning itself can get a little intimidating for some. So I'd say take it simple because you can create amazing images with a simple phone camera. So upgrade with baby steps.
Amu, also another, Amrita, sorry. How do we add watermark to images? Satish R.
Satish, on your phone, you know what, I think so only PS Express allows you to add a watermark, but on one of their paid versions. And it's just a simple click of a button that allows you to add watermarks. But otherwise, I would typically say use an app like Adobe Lightroom on your systems to add watermarks. And it's again a very simple process. There are plenty of YouTube videos around it as well to show you. All you have to do is make sure that that watermark exists on your system as a file, and then you import it into Lightroom and then apply it when you're exporting the image. So it's a series of steps which I don't want to get into here, but I can guarantee there are plenty of YouTube tutorials to show you this.
Okay. We have a question from Sukanya Arun. What kind of color should we choose for baby photography? Can the background have multiple colors, or should we choose the same basic color?
Okay, that's a beautiful question. So here's the little thumb rule I give all my clients when they come in to work with me. In fact, we have a really nice PDF we share with them, breaking down different color codes and combinations so that they can use those color codes and combinations across the entire family as well. But a generic rule would be stick to light, solid colors, avoid bright colors like neons and really loud colors, and avoid prints as much as possible. Now, it's very hard to find solid color clothing in India. You obviously get a lot of baby clothes with prints, but try to find at least subtle printed clothing and then use those. The reason I keep saying this is because when you have light muted shades like earthy browns, creams, greens, light yellow, light blue, light pink, what happens is when you look at a photograph, the first thing your eyes will fall on is the subject. But if you have really bright clothes, then the viewer's eyes get distracted. It doesn't fall on the subject, it falls on the bright elements around it. So in order to make sure that the babies are in focus in my pictures, I tell them to mute out everything with really light clothing. In fact, I go to the extent and tell moms, bring whatever simple onesies you have at home, like a plain white onesie, and I'll make magic out of that. So the same applies to you as well when you're taking pictures at home. But if you're using printed backgrounds, like you mentioned, I think what you should do is make sure that the baby is in a solid color and let the background be printed. You can't have a print on the subject as well as the background. That can get a little too confusing for the viewer, and your baby will sort of get drowned out in all those prints and colors. I hope that helps you.
Another question from Ashika. Any manual setting for capturing fast moving objects?
Okay, so if you're looking at manual settings, then what you want to do is up your shutter speed to capture fast moving subjects. When you increase your shutter speed, you can do that, but you can only increase your shutter speed on third-party apps like X Pro Camera and so on that allows you to move your settings around. But otherwise, if you're just using your regular phone camera and you want to capture fast moving objects and there is not enough light around, one, add light, or two, take them to a place where there's a lot of light and then do it. Yeah.
The next question is from Preeti. Please, could you tell a little about stage light feature on the portrait mode on iPhone?
Okay, so I'm actually not the best person for that because I know the portrait mode has several features. It really, I would tell you, is to go ahead and experiment with it, but the stage light feature is pretty straightforward. But all those different modes, I really don't play around with it too much because one, you've got to have clear backdrops when you're using it. So you want to take the effort to find clean, clear backdrops. Like what's behind me is a plain white wall. That would work really well for your stage mode in your portrait settings. But the other features as well, make sure plain backdrops work well and there's good light. And another thing that could also help you is also positioning the light. Like if you have a choice, for example, right now I have a ring light over here. Now I can keep it here, I can keep it on the side, or I can keep it right in front. For your shots, it's always best to be fully lit, where light's falling straight on the subject's face. So I'm hoping these tips help you, but I've not really experimented too much with those features because I'm not a fan. Next.
Could you elaborate on the FX feature on portrait mode and how to use it?
I wish I could connect my phone to this. Just give me a second. Let me figure. Okay, so the FX mode is really nice actually. Who's asking me this question? Komal. So, okay, this was directed straight to you, Komal, because I haven't covered it in the session for good reason. The FX mode in your portrait mode basically means when you take a picture, you can go to your gallery, open that particular picture you've taken in portrait mode at the bottom right. And this is on your iPhones. I think it also is on the Google Pixel as well. There's a button called FX where you can actually go and change the aperture of your photograph to increase or decrease the amount of depth of field or your isolation, or in simple terms, blur in the background. So you can increase it between f1.6 to almost, I think, f11, if I'm not mistaken. So that's how you use the FX in portrait mode. So Komal, I hope that helps you. If you have any more questions about that, I can answer it here with everyone else's questions.
Harika Krishnamurthy has asked, is night mode good to take pictures at night in outdoor locations or normal mode?
Okay, definitely. If your phone supports night mode, that's the best thing to use when you're out at night. But what's important, be it night mode or regular mode at night, you'll have to make sure you have still subjects, because even the slightest movement won't give you sharp images, because your phone is not a master at shooting in darkness, because it doesn't have a very large sensor. It has a really small sensor. So you want to make sure you don't challenge your phone camera's capabilities, but work within it. So have fixed objects in your frame, or subjects that don't move and hold still for a few seconds. So keep that in mind.
Amrita, before the next question, can I just request you to remove the screen share?
Sorry, yes.
Okay. So there's one Amala who has asked how to avoid shakes in photos because babies are moving really fast.
Amla, the best thing to do is to add more light. And I feel like I'm repeating this, constantly throughout the entire session, but really investing in a simple light like this, like a ring light, it costs about 2,500 if you buy it off Amazon, and keeping that beside your bed, because you can even tilt this thing to actually, drop light on the bed below, or you can even hold it up, push it back up to face someone tall enough. So using additional light can really, really help you freeze action better, because using just the tube lights or the ceiling lights in your room will not be enough unless you're going outdoors again and going into a lawn where there's a lot of open light, natural light outside. So freezing action of kids is possibly the most challenging thing when it comes to smartphone photography with children. And that's when I actually talk honestly about really investing in 1 or 2 lights to help get you nice pictures which you can frame and put into an album as, real mommy shots there.
There's a question from Ramya K. How do we edit and remove our hand if we hold the baby in photos?
Okay, so Ramya, this is this exact same process you need to follow for when I actually remove the little blemish from the little baby's face using Photoshop Express. So I used a simple spot healing tool on PS Express app, which you can use to quickly, so wherever your photograph is in the frame, you simply tap on those portions, make a big brush and tap it off the portions, and your hand will disappear. But if it's a really big portion covered with your hand, then you won't be able to do. So if it's just your hand over here and this is a baby's face, this part is easy to remove. But if your hand is here and you want to remove it, it's not going to be possible. You'll have to give it to an expert, and if it's a smartphone photograph, it has only so much of resolution.
Meghna Sridhar has asked, what is HDR and how do you use it?
Okay, Meghna, again, great question with that one. So HDR is typically something, or rather it's a feature in your phone that allows you to take multiple pictures at different exposure levels, and then your camera uses its own intelligence to compress all those 3 pictures to give you one really sharp image with the right amount of highlights, shadows, and exposure. Okay, so HDR, I wouldn't really use it when I'm capturing children, but if you're shooting landscape, shooting architecture, sunsets, that's when I would typically use HDR.
Thank you. There's Aarti Bharati's question. Can you explain some good editing options that give good photos, as we have so many options on the iPhone?
Can you explain the editing option that gives good
editing
photos?
options?
Okay, yeah. No, I'm just, so actually, Aarti, we had just covered all of those things. So on your iPhone itself, I'm just going to quickly pull out something. I hope, just tell me if you can see it. Hold on, just a second. So can you see this particular image over here, right? By simply hitting the edit button on the top left, I have this particular screen with all my, I have all my settings over here at the bottom. These are good enough editing options. In fact, I think what the free editing apps available in the market offer have now been captured by Samsung and iPhone and so on and given to you in your gallery itself that you can play around with. One of the best tools over here, I think for someone who doesn't want to get too caught up in the details of editing, is the Brilliance option. And I'm just going to do it right here. Hold on. You see the one that says Brilliance over here on top? Using that, what that helps you with is it helps you really improve the lighting in your entire picture, keeping in mind the contrast, the saturation, and the hue as well. So Brilliance is a really good tool to use on your smartphone editing tools itself. I hope that was clear, but look for Brilliance otherwise. And that's one of the most powerful tools you can use there.
From Maha, taking a shot of a subject which is a bit farther. For example, when your child is on stage getting an award and when we're seated way at the back. How do you get a good shot?
Maha, you can't buy a Maruti 800 and expect it to perform like a Ferrari. Stand up and physically move forward because your phone can't zoom. Because you have a zoom option on your phone, which you can use, but I would strictly say do not use zoom or do not use that ugly flash from the phones at all. If you should be the zoom button. That is, you stand up and move forward, or you stand up and move back and then take the picture. Because if the moment you start zooming into your current camera app, it starts to reduce the resolution to a whole new level and you will not like those pictures. So one, if you're stuck in the back, you'll have to actually physically excuse yourself, move forward to the front of the stage and take that picture to get a nice clear one. There is no hack there.
While taking shots from top, my shadow is falling on the photo. How can we avoid this? Amala.
Okay, Amla, that's a nice question. So what you need to do is first switch off the light on top. Okay, because only if there's light on top will there be a shadow below. So right now my light's on the side, so my shadow is on this side. If my light's in front here, then there's like very little shadow here, right? So you want to understand where the light is coming from and then understand where the shadow is falling. So first switch off the light on top so you have no shadow falling on the baby. Then you've got to find a light that can be placed on the side to take the picture. Now, typically, all my professional pictures as well are shot at a 45-degree angle of light. So wherever my light source is, I'm making sure my subjects are not facing the light fully, but they are at a 45-degree angle to the light. So there's a little bit of shadow, and that brings out more depth and character into your portrait. So find a light that comes from the side. It could be even a wall light, or it could be any sort of light, but make sure it's from the side, not from the top.
There's a question from Deepa. Sometimes even in bright light, the pictures comes out a little grainy. How do we avoid it?
If your pictures are coming out grainy when there is bright light, then I think you've got to go and check. I don't know if you're using an external app, that can happen. That's because sometimes by default, your phone itself may set the resolution of the camera to low. So go to your settings, make sure that your camera settings are at normal or high, and then take the picture. Because if there's bright light, you ideally should not have any grain in your pictures. Otherwise, something's going wrong there.
Kavita is asking if the continuous shot mode will help get a clearer picture of a moving child. Where and when to use that?
Okay, so yes, definitely using the burst mode where you simply hold the shutter and keep it held down. So it takes a series of shots, right? That's a great way to actually capture action, but the where and when is when you want to capture action, and where is when there's ample light outdoors. So I've done this on my trips as well, where I've seen a child sitting on top of the tree and I know he's going to jump. So I've pointed my camera there and I've waited for him to take the jump, and I've gone on burst mode and captured him falling through every single step into the water and the water splashing. I have got that in focus because one, I tapped on the subject before they jumped. Second, I also shot this in broad daylight. Lots of light. That can really help you freeze action like that.
Great. Nikita Victoria has asked, will editing option reduce the pixels of the actual photograph? Will we get a good print of the photo if it is edited?
Yes, Nikita, I think if you overdo the editing, it will definitely affect the quality of the photograph. But I think smartphone editing apps don't allow you to do too much editing anyway. I'm talking about intense editing that I do on Photoshop. Those can actually form layers over my picture and cause, a certain amount of, let's say, not as much sharpness. But what your smartphone apps allow you to do isn't going to kill it too much. So what you want to do is, and this is, general advice I tell everyone, is you want to keep your pictures as real as possible. You don't want to over manipulate it or under manipulate it either, because all of us want our pictures to be brighter than what we took in our phones, right? And what I showed you in terms of comparison. So when you're editing, make sure you correct all the wrongs and then leave it at that. Don't keep adding stuff or don't keep experimenting on the same picture over and over again, because that can lead to pixelation. If you want to choose different filters on the same picture, make copies of that photograph and then experiment with filters. So that should help you prevent any pixelation. And I love the fact that you're thinking about printing, because most people forget to print. Please print.
Megha Chug has asked, what is the use of live feature work in the smartphone camera?
Okay, so I think the live feature really came about was to freeze again a series of actions, or like a moment. Okay, that was the whole idea. They wanted to capture moments in tag bits. So if you look at the live pictures taken on your phone, it's basically 3 pictures taken at a shot. So it's if I'm actually lifting this cup, so it can go 1, 2, 3, right? That is basically your live. It's almost like a boomerang, but a boomerang is a little longer. So that's what live photos were really set out to do. So it sort of helps you remember the moment better by looking at a series of actions stitched together as photographs.
Great. And this one's from Ashika Nisha. How do you store and manage the pictures?
Okay, so I have a whole new category of, I have a whole system over there. There's a huge process I follow. So when I have about 97,000 pictures on my iPhone, which is crazy, but it's been over the years, and I keep, making sure I take them onto my next phone as I upgrade. What I do for myself is, for every trip I've made, I make sure all photographs sit in that particular folder. So I have a series of folders, and I think your phone itself now gives you the capability of segregating things by month, by date, by year, and it's easy for you to pull out. So one, if your phone does not have that, then you want to start creating folders, and every basic phone in the market allows you to create folders within your photo gallery to compartmentalize your pictures, so you can always find it easy to pull it out later.
Great. And from Priyanka Suraj, I have a Canon camera. Is it better to shoot in RAW or in JPEG?
Okay, this is a step ahead of our workshop itself, but Priyanka, just to answer your question, always RAW, because with RAW, you want to capture a lot more detail, and it allows you to really make intensive edits if you want to. And generally, I think it's a higher resolution image. So if you want to print them out and blow them up to a big picture, the RAW is always better. But if it's just as a hobby and you don't care about editing them, then JPEG is an easier version, because one, it is more compressed, and two, your camera has a small capability of processing those pictures a little more than the RAW ones. And you'll get a pretty nicely lit picture in a JPEG versus a RAW.
Okay, I'm going to combine 2 questions, Amu. We have, how do you get clear pictures printed if using a smartphone? And there's another question from Ramya that says, I have OnePlus phone, but the photos are not so clear when I print it out.
Okay, I think the question I have, I'm going to take the second question first. You've got great pictures, but when you print them, they're not as clear. So one, it could be wrong. Something could be wrong with the printing process, or two, you're not being real with yourself, and maybe those pictures itself are not as clear as they should be. So it's a problem with either the printing process or you facing reality that the pictures itself are not as clear as they should be. And I think that's something you need to correct on both fronts to get the pictures to be nice and clear. Because honestly, I think our phone pictures, which are anywhere between 1 to 4 MB, can easily be printed into a nice 6:8 portrait, and you ideally shouldn't have too much grain if you've taken the picture well. So your pictures will only not come out well in print when you've not shot them well, or you've not shot them under the right lighting circumstances. So keep that in mind. It's okay to be self-critical in this point and then figure out the problem. So what was the first question, Chandra?
Same thing. Like when she's taking the photo on the smartphone, it doesn't come out well in print.
So I think I'll leave you with there's a website called Zoom In, ZOOMIN. It's pretty popular now. They actually do fairly good prints of your smartphone pictures, because I know all of us have all these pictures and we don't take the time out to segregate them and then go out there and print them and then put them into an album. There are lots of online platforms that help you do that. So Zoom In is one of them, and I think Hail Moments, I'm not sure. I think we can send that out to your emails that we've captured here. I'll think of a few more and I'll come back to you. But Zoom in is a quick one. Upload your picture online, they print it out and they courier it to your house. It's as simple as that.
That's great. Amala has asked, which camera would you suggest for a beginner like me?
Okay, I'm biased to Sony because I've been using Sony for some time now. There's a Sony A6500, which is newly entered the market about a couple of months ago. It's a crop frame camera, but a brilliant camera, and it can do so much in terms of giving you really great quality pictures. So if you're looking at investing in in a DSLR, the A6500 is a beautiful camera to start with. And somebody did ask me about what's a great lens to start with. If you're looking at capturing kids at home, the 35mm and a 50mm. You can choose either or. They're great lenses to start with. The 35mm is great for storytelling because it's a wide angle. Our phones are 28mm. 35 is slightly less wide, but perfect for storytelling. And 50mm is great for portraits.
Okay. What is a single take mode in a Samsung phone from Harika Krishnamurthy?
Single take mode on the Samsung phone is basically it's as explanatory as is mentioned there. It's a single take. It doesn't allow you to do burst in that particular mode. And I think that's precisely it, Harika, because I actually am not a Samsung user, but from what I've used before, the single take just allows you not to take a burst mode here. There's one more question from Samsung thing somewhere I saw. No, it was someone asking about how the size of the pictures that you can print. How big can we print the pictures? Sorry, it's not a Samsung question, but I think, like I said earlier, the 8x10 size is a great size to keep it at. I wouldn't go larger than that because there will be a little bit of pixelation that begins to show unless you've shot it in beautiful light. Like you really lit your subject very well, then you're going to have maybe a high print possible, but otherwise it can get as big as this. If you're also thinking about, those hoardings you see that the iPhone puts up, they actually do Photoshop the pictures to quite an extent to fill up all the mixing pixels, and then they blow it up to a hoarding size. But also the latest iPhones give you really massive size images as well, because the cameras are more equipped to take high-res pictures.
And Shivantika wants to know, would you suggest instant printers which print pictures from the phone? If so, can you suggest any good ones?
I think the HP one is pretty good. Instant printers, there are quite a few actually. The HP ones, there are two types. There's a simple Polaroid looking one, and then there's a proper, like a small desk printer, which is about, say, the size of, I don't know, say about 6 by 5 inches big, which you can place on your desk. Both of them do a fairly good job, but you just got to, they run out of ink pretty fast. So just be prepared to keep replenishing that portion alone.
Komal has a question. Komal? Yeah. Komal.
Hello?
Yeah, Komal.
Yeah, ma'am, actually, I just missed your answer. I asked you about FX portrait. So I just missed your message actually. I didn't understood.
Okay, hold on, just a second. I'm trying to see if I can pull it out here. Can we take the next question till I come back to Komal's?
Yeah.
The next question is from my fundraising convener, Mathura.
Yes, Mathura, hi.
Amrita, can you suggest some good editing apps available?
Yes, sure. I'm going to put them in the chat so everybody can see as well. So one is VS Code. Second is Snapseed. Snapseed is very detailed. You can do a lot over there. Then there's Adobe Lightroom, where you can even buy presets online. In fact, with my 2020 program launching in September, I'm creating presets for moms to use on children's photographs as well. Adobe Lightroom is great for that. And then there's PS Express. That's the app we use to clear the baby's chin and the baby's skin as well, which is way more detailed. So Snapseed, and PS Express are very detailed apps. VS Code, Adobe Lightroom are simpler apps to use where you just apply filters, make small changes and move on from that.
Thank you.
So, no problem.
And for Komal's answer, effects.
I'm trying to find a frame where I've used portrait mode so I can show her what that looks like. Any other questions before I find that out?
Yes, Akriti Khemka, for maternity photo shoot, what colors are recommended for parents to wear?
The same thing as I mentioned earlier, Akriti, which is light, solid colors. Avoid prints and avoid really bright colors. Especially maternity, you want to avoid prints because if there's a print running across the bump and I'm standing in front of you, I may not even be able to see the bump, the baby bump. So make sure you wear light, solid colors so that they show the shape of the baby bump, as well as make sure you angle yourself well for those pictures. Okay, I think I've got her pictures. Just give me a second. Any other questions before I help Komal?
Yes, Ashwini Aravind, any tips on how to set background to capture sitter sessions?
To set the background, okay, ideally you can do something really simple. So if you want to get a nice clean studio looking portrait at home, you take the back, so the chair I'm sitting, you flip it around the other way and the back of the chair is flat, right? Only in front you have the seating portion. So use the back of it, keep two like that. So you have like two leveled chairs, put a blanket over it, let it flow down to the floor, put another blanket on the floor covering the rough edges, and then place your baby in front of that and use that as your backdrop. Make sure to clip it on the chair on top so it doesn't fall off. So that's a quick hack to show you. Okay, so can I quickly take Komal's?
Yeah.
All right, so Komal, what I have here is a portrait picture, okay, on my phone. I'm going to hit edit on top, all right, and I also see my aperture mentioned on top over here. It says 4.5 for this particular image. I can tap on that and I get a slider at the bottom which I can move back and forth to increase or decrease the blur of my image, and that is your feature that you've been asking me for.
Ashika Nisha wants to know if there's any hacks for toddler photography.
Ashika, the real hacks come into play when you sort of mesmerize them with magic tricks. And I really mean learn the basics of magic tricks, because that really helps me as well, or learning what their world is about at that particular time. Toddlers are usually 1 to 3 years of age, and they're exposed to a range of things, that stage where they're curious about things around them. They're exploring by touching, feeling, asking questions. So I really play with what they know, how much they know, and what characters or what fills up their world. For example, like Peppa Pig, to repeat myself, or you know, Pocoyo, or whatever they're watching on YouTube, right? I'm always watching that content as well, so I can make a connection with them. Until then, I'm a stranger, but the moment I start talking about their favorite characters, I'm their best friend, right? And then they slowly start to trust me and then want to get closer to me. Or I just make it really fun for them. Giving them activities can really help. It's something that they'll enjoy, like putting them in a bathtub and just asking them to splash around, giving them baking items like flour and, you know, all of that, and just making them play. That's the best way to get them close to you. It's good for you to get them in your zone with all of these little activities and tasks and tricks. After that, it's about you being ready to take pictures as you talk to them. And I love asking them questions when I'm taking pictures. So when they're responding, because some questions will excite them. So I'll say, what's your favorite fruit? And they'll be like, Fruit Loops. And you know, I know there's something exciting coming out. And I'm ready with my camera to take those pictures. Or if I ask them, I don't know, funny questions like, you know, show me your angry face, show me your piggy face. And I know those expressions will come, but all depends on the mood. And as moms, I think you'll be the expert at reading those moods and knowing when they're playful enough to elicit those reactions to you. I hope all of that helps you. One more thing is always adding another kid in the equation. So one of the things we do at Mommy Shots is something called play dates, where I tell moms to bring their kid along with their best friends from school or from their apartment, and we get them to just play. Because the moment their friends are in their environment, you know, they're a different person altogether. They're just like partners in crime over there. So I sort of bring those extra kids in just to add a whole new life to the chapter, and then I start taking pictures around that.
Amrita, we're taking the last question.
Yeah.
From Beena Sujay. My kid is 7 years old. She's extremely camera friendly. So what kind of shoots do you suggest? We are done with shoots in parks, playtime shoots, etc. I'm looking for more ideas related to this.
All right. So for 7-year-olds or for kids who are older, first of all, it's amazing, Beena, that your kid is camera friendly, because at this age, I've noticed most kids are just like, oh no, I'm too good for this, or they just turn away, or they're not ready to befriend you as well. But I think that's me, and being a stranger. But as a mom, I think what's amazing is that you've gone through the whole shooting in parks, shooting playtime, maybe even playing dress up with them really helps. But at this point, they're listening, they're taking instructions, they understand what you're asking of them. It's great to actually do portraits, like I'm talking about real nice art portraits, like dressing them up as a nice I don't know, say a Frida Kahlo, or as any of these characters you want them to impersonify. So get the whole outfit, the look. These are things that they'll be excited about, because now they understand they're in the limelight. So I use that to my advantage and script a shot with them. But otherwise, you want to get something real and natural, then yes, I mean, I would take them outdoors with their best friends to the beach and let them just be themselves there. So there's two very extreme answers I've given you, but I hope one of them help you.
Thank you for so patiently answering all the questions. I think we're done taking questions. Over to you, Sapna. Can you please take over?